Gentleman from 16.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to the bill, and I wonder if the good gentleman from District 3 would yield to a question.
Will the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yields.
The gentleman yields.
Is this, gentlemen, is this new bill that we have before us today a nullification bill, or isn't it?
It is a direction of the state agencies to stop implementing the federal mandate. If you want to call it a nullification bill in the sense that, as we did with the Real ID Act last year, we're defying a federal statute, then you're free to do so. But the bottom line is we're directing the state agencies to stop spending time and money.
Is it the, Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman yield to a further question?
Will the gentleman yield further?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, the gentleman.
The gentleman yields.
Is it the intention of the state of Idaho, if this bill is passed, is it the intention that the state of Idaho would defy, as you say, with force?
Mr. Speaker, Representative from 16, it would not be my intention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, debate against the bill.
The gentleman has the floor.
Thank you. I appreciate very much the remarks of the good gentleman from District 3. The first bill we got was a nullification bill. This bill may or may not be a nullification bill, but I think it is extremely important that anybody listening to this debate today and considering what the state of Idaho may or may not do with respect to this bill understand something very important, and that is that the sponsor of this bill does not anticipate the state of Idaho using force to defy the federal government of the United States of America. For me, the issue of politics has nothing to do with this bill. To me, this is an issue about who I am and who all of us are. And I know who I am. I am an American. And I know why I am an American. I am an American because many thousands of Americans who came before me laid down their lives in the American Revolution, and 360,000 Americans laid down their lives in the Civil War, and 280,000 Confederates laid down their lives in the Civil War. Nullification, interposition, and secession in our history go together. And they represent a view of America that has never had anything to do with the state of Idaho. Nullification, interposition, and secession were the invention of southern states that wished to preserve slavery in America. Idaho has never been a slave state. Idaho wasn't even a state during the Civil War. These are concepts that are foreign to me as the other thing that I am, an Idahoan. And I do not believe that these are concepts that we Idahoans should import into our state, our culture, and our identity of who we are. As late as 1957, the United States government faced a crisis in the state of Arkansas, a former rebellious state, when federal courts had ordered the integration of the Little Rock, Arkansas schools. And President Eisenhower, as has been mentioned earlier, sent in federal troops, and in 1958 the United States Supreme Court handed down a decision essentially saying that Arkansas's attempts to nullify Brown versus Board of Education were in violation of the Supremacy Clause and that federal power was supreme. So in our modern history, once again, this concept of nullification comes to us not as indigenous Idahoans, but as a foreign concept to us as a people, as Idahoans, a concept of subjugation and slavery. Now, nullification rests on the compact theory of government. I've gone online, I've read many of the articles that have been written by the proponents of nullification. Many of them do a couple of things to get us to the idea of nullification. They say that our government rests, our federal government, our federal system rests on a compact theory of government. It has been said in this House before, and I will say it again today. Federalist 46, authored by James Madison, makes abundantly clear that the federal government is not an agent of the states. The states and the federal government are together agents of the people. Thomas Jefferson authored some words that are very important to us here today, I believe. In the Declaration of Independence, he said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Thomas Jefferson did not say that states have rights. He did not say that governments have rights. Thomas Jefferson said people have rights. I have rights. All of us have rights. All of us Idahoans and all of us Americans have rights. I believe that bills such as this spring from a notion that this legislature is a better protector of the rights of the people than is the United States Supreme Court. I do not accept that. Both the United States Supreme Court and this body are organs of government. I, as an individual, do not trust any organ of government wholly when it comes to my rights. States in our history have been great oppressors of people. The federal government has oppressed people. We are an imperfect union. We are a society struggling towards perfection. But our institutions are institutions of people, and as such they are imperfect. And I do not agree that this body is more wise or more just, even though I know that it strives to be wise and strives to be just. I know that the United States Supreme Court, I know that our state Supreme Court, I know that the other courts also strive to be wise and just. And so we are not superior in our wisdom in this body. And we should be careful about what we do. Now, this notion of what government is set out in our constitutions. It is important to remember, although said here today before, that the Constitution of the United States was not ratified by the state legislatures. It was not ratified by the states, and it was not created by the states. It was ratified in constitutional conventions held in each of the 13 states by specially elected delegates of the people. And the Constitution of the United States begins, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, etc., do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." The state of Idaho had nothing to do with the formation of this nation. The state of Idaho had nothing to do with the formation of this federal government. Indeed, not looked at in a legal manner, but looked at as a matter of practicality. Who created the state of Idaho? The United States of America conquered this land and created the circumstances under which this state could exist. And it took an act of the Congress of the United States to create us. Nullification stands those historical facts on their head. And who among our presidents was largely responsible for the creation of this great state? The greatest anti-nullifier of them all. The man of incredible courage, foresight, conviction, and compassion, Abraham Lincoln. One wonders what he would think of this bill today. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution. We hear a lot about sovereignty, and we hear a lot about states' rights. The 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. It does not contain the word sovereignty and it does not contain the word rights because governments have powers. Governments do not have rights. And in our federal system, the Constitution of the United States says that the Constitution of the United States and federal laws are the supreme laws of the land. Now, I actually agree with much of what the good gentleman from Legislative District 31 had to say here today about what I would think and do had I been privileged to be in the Constitutional Convention that led to our Constitution of 1789. There has been an incredible growth of federal power. And the issue before us is not whether or not that growth of federal power is a good or a bad thing. It's how to redress it if we don't like it. And I would say that nullification is not the way to do it. The Constitution of the state of Idaho also recognizes that the state does not have rights, it has powers. And it was formed by people who have rights and delegated powers to the state government. The preamble of our Constitution in Idaho says, "We, the people of the state of Idaho, grateful to Almighty God for our freedom, to secure its blessings and promote our common welfare, do establish this Constitution." The reference to Almighty God is a reference, I think, to the Declaration of Independence, where Jefferson said that our rights come from our Maker. Our rights are not vindicated. Our rights are not defended, in many cases, by our governments. And it falls to us, the people, to make sure that when that occurs, we change our governments. And how do we change governments in the United States? We hold elections in the United States. That's what we do. And you know what? When it comes to federal health care, there were some folks who lost some elections, and there were some folks who won some elections, and that's how we got those bills. And guess what happened? Last time, just this past November, some of the folks who passed that federal health care law lost some elections, and a different party gained control of the United States House of Representatives, and that law may get changed. And that's how we do things. Because I as a citizen, you as a citizen, and all of the other Idahoans and Americans get to vote for who they want to represent them in Congress. And that government, the federal government, is not a tyrannical foreign occupying power. It is, as Jackson said and as Lincoln said, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And we in this body are not so wise and so much more intelligent than our constituents as to know who they should vote for and how their representatives in the Congress should vote. This is a large nation. We are now some 300 million Americans. There are many states in the United States where the body politic views the world quite differently than we do in Idaho. The people in those states are our fellow citizens, they are our families, they are our friends, they are our business associates, they are our fellow Americans. And many of them hold different views than we do in Idaho. And every once in a while, they arrange a majority that do things in the Congress we don't like and we don't agree with. And every once in a while, we get together with states that think like us, and we get majorities in the Congress, and we do things they don't like. Are we all going to get up and leave the table when somebody doesn't like what we do or somebody doesn't like what they do? I'd like to talk a little bit about something I think all of us remember, Bush versus Gore. Remember in Florida in 2000? Came down to the state of Florida as to who was going to be our next president, George W. Bush or Al Gore. And that case went up to the United States Supreme Court, and as a result of the Supreme Court's decision, George W. Bush became president. Let me ask you, do you really think California and Illinois and New York and a whole bunch of blue states could have nullified that Supreme Court decision? Because if you do, you know what we would have had in this country? We would have had two presidents. We would have had a president of California and Illinois and New York and Washington and Oregon, and we would have had a president of Idaho and Nebraska and Alabama. Does that make any sense? It doesn't make any sense to me. Now, there's one thing about being a legislator that I really like to do and really means a lot to me. Every day in this House, I say the Pledge of Allegiance to my flag. And the words in that Pledge of Allegiance mean a great deal to me when I say them. One nation, under God, indivisible. 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 Lincoln said it best, a house divided against itself cannot stand. A country with two presidents cannot stand. We must respect the right of our fellow Americans to disagree with us and to be wrong. And they must respect our right to disagree with them and to be wrong, and to recognize that over time, despite the minority rights that are built into our federal and state constitutions, that despite those rights, over time, the majority eventually gets its way. And that's how our state works as well. And one of the things that I have learned to be as a legislator and as a voter and as a citizen of this great state, because my views are generally in the minority, is I think I've learned, and I think many of you whom I know so well now have learned, is how to be a good loser and pull yourself up and fight for another day. I would never deny the right of this legislature to govern this state by majority rule, even though my viewpoint is often, most of the time, in the minority, because that is the democratic process my forebears bargained for, and I accept. And the Republican, federal, democratic process my forebears bargained for and I accept makes this federal union supreme. And the Supreme Court of the United States of America will decide this federal health care issue. And I am grateful beyond your belief that I heard today, when the United States Supreme Court makes that decision, we will not defy it with force. Too many Americans have died for that. Thank you.